guys, welcome to the Eddie Gray Mastermind. This is a community where we offer production advice, networking, accountability, and good vibes. Thank you for being here. I'm your host, Eddie Gray, and I feel honored. Truly, truly, truly honored to be here. Could have been anybody else, and for whatever reason, the seas have been parted, and I'm here to serve, to help, to contribute, to push you. So here's how it's going to go. We're going to get into mastering. I'm going to show you a high level mastering scenario first, and then once we kind of get into it a bit, I'll go through all the different categories or stages, beginner, medium, intermediate, super high level, advanced. So this is a part of my mixing and mastering course. I will start offering new webinars, more information. I'm getting to the point where, because I see so many people, I have to start cataloging these conversations in order to now point the direction, and this will help me touch as many lives as I possibly can, and also will help me serve as many people as I possibly can as well. So here is a song that is a modern electronic music song. We're also going to go over rock and roll, hip hop, and some kind of cinematic ambient music as well. So yeah, the topic is mixing and mastering. It's obviously a very deep topic, but we can start to have this conversation and grow our consciousness and grow our confidence as well. Let me read a quote from Mr. Tom Frampton, who's an incredible audio engineer, producer, and also makes the best metering plugins in the game. He says this: "Merely listening to music is not enough. You have to understand what's happening at the core of a song to propel your growth and ability as a music producer." So that's really the basis of what we're doing today. When we think about our mixes, I want you to think about a lot of different things. It's not just how loud it is. It's not about, how distorted it is. It's the combination of all these things put together that really make it work. Let me check my sound here, and then we'll get right into it. All right, so I'm all set up here. Before I get into some details, I do want to bypass the song and help you understand how we're getting the fullness and that overall just polished sound. So this is without the mastering chain, just a basic mix. Now, there are various approaches to this. We know that we can bounce a two-way stereo file, send that over to a new session, and then conduct a proper master. Sometimes in the world of licensing, we don't have that luxury of time, so we got to do it all in-house. If you have a computer that's powerful, obviously helps. You don't need it, but it does help. So let's just take a listen to the sonics here. Listen to how loud it is, how full stereo image. Check it out. All right, great. And then now when I insert the chain, take a listen. So a lot of things happen when I eliminate it. There's not a lot of beefiness. The kick automatically goes away. The sound becomes less round. There's a lot of consequences to eliminating that chain. So before I get into the ins and outs, how I made that happen, why I made that happen, right? Because it's about making the choice, not just defaulting to a mastering chain. Now, I do recommend you create mastering chains just to get the ball rolling, but ultimately, you're going to have to learn how to fish rather than just catch one fish. So let's get into how all this works. When you have a demo, this is, an idea that came from a moment of inspiration, a collaboration, what have you. In order to get it to the mastering stage, in order for it to become a professional sounding recording for sync, for radio, etc., there are several things that have to happen. Number one, you have to edit the audio, the MIDI, the track as a whole. That's kind of the first stage, right? After you create all your proper edits, crossfades, make sure there's no clicks or pops, then you get into the arranging phase. Now this is where you kind of take a step back and you look at the song from a distance, and almost like a listener, How would the listener react to this song? Would they be interested? Would they be into it? So this is a good moment of objectivity and perhaps one of the most crucial in the mastering process. Well, of course, once we've done that, we can get into audio treatment by way of EQ and compression, which are really two of the cornerstones of music production. If there's four things that you need to learn, which are the most important, I would say it would be EQ, compression, reverb, and delay. If you just cover those subjects and you master them, you've done most of the work, in all fairness. Um, that's my personal opinion after, mixing thousands of songs and being around a lot of sessions. It seems like everything revolves around those four concepts. Of course, saturation is important. Of course, other concepts like modulation and things like that are important, but they're not the cornerstones of mixing and mastering. All right. Then we get into gain staging. So gain staging is a concept that has a lot of various arguments to the left and to the right, but to really keep it simple, how loud the sound is. Now, I'm not talking about by means of automation, right? If we do things with automation, this is happening um, after the effects. So what I'm talking about is pre-fader, before the sounds go into the inserts effects, if you will. And so how we do that is by essentially raising up the gain of the regions themselves. In Logic, you have something that's called a region inspector. Now, this can be pulled out as well. And if I wanted to raise this section for whatever reason, let's say this was a breakdown, we wanted the drums to come up to fill more of the space, in which case we would go here and I would lift up the gain by dragging up, and you can see that the transients are now getting bigger and or smaller if I go the opposite way. So gain staging is a very important part of the process as well. There's a lot more to say, but for now, just to keep this succinct, we will kind of stick there. We talked about reverb and delay, often referred to as depth, right? The differentiation of space, right? I'm in a room right now. It sounds like I'm in a room. If I was in a cathedral, that would be an entirely different experience. So various parts of your mix, various tracks should sound differently, like they're in different parts of the room. Sometimes you want a snare that has a really wet sound, right? Travels across time and distance. Sometimes you want a bass or a hand clap that's just right there in your face, here, right now. So the fact that you create the differentiation is what creates a good mix. If everything sounds like it's in the same room, then it's not really going to appeal. It's not really going to translate well. We have to have contrast in order to really make this work. Finally, we get into width, mono, stereo, right? And also panning. If we move things around, if we create modulation, various volume levels, this can really make the mix interesting, can kind of really carry a mix, if you will. So finally, contrast. That's the name of the game. This is how this all works. If you listen to my mixes, I always create various levels of contrast, even, with a simple uh, clap section. Let's take a listen to all the various, um, levels of depth. So we've got two hand claps that are coming in. I've panned them to different degrees, but it does sound like a room. Then I've got the mono clap, which is just dry right in the middle. And then I've got this really wet clap that's basically kind of moving. And that piques people's interest, right? It's interesting. Let's keep moving here. Okay, fantastic. So you can clearly see my song has already gone through pre-production. This won't always happen. Sometimes you're on a deadline. Sometimes you're just creatively called, and so you won't be able to do all this, but I highly recommend you do. It's a lot easier to look at a session with 50 tracks or so than it is to look at one that has no naming, no coloring. It's a nightmare, actually. So yeah, please group everything together, all the drums, all the kicks. Please be sure to name and color everything appropriately. Again, omitting dead space, make sure everything is edited. I don't want any noise when I hear my mixes, right? I want everything to be clean, very polished. Um, if you have the time, create markers. This is, again, something else that can help in the future. If you get a request for something in 6 months and they ask you to move the hook, you now have to go in there and look for it rather than the work being done. This was a song for an artist, and I was working on a deadline, so I did not create that. When I mix, I personally like to add a compressor to my song. So this is just something I do so the song sounds louder and bigger. Again, another controversial topic, but I like to hear the sound as as kind of ultimately what it's going to be, right? And so in order to do that, I have to create a simulation, and a compression achieves that. Let's see here. Of course, add any samples or risers to fill out the song. These are just, the bells and whistles, the decorations on a Christmas tree. The song is really the meat and potatoes, and all this other stuff is just kind of decorating the entire song. Once you do all that, then you want to make sure to do what's called a static mix. And a static mix is basically just a overall volume and pan mix. Some people also say an EQ and compression mix. I'll leave that up to you. But the point is you just get a sense of where everything's gonna sit sonically, and then you go ahead and apply the various treatment, which is part of the production phase. This is when we apply audio treatment, EQ, compression, modulation effects, automation, and of course any edits, uh, you know, pauses, stutters, things like that. So finally, once it's all said and done and you're done with the production phase, you have post-production phase. Now, I don't necessarily think about it like this, but I wanted to clearly delineate all of the different parts of a master, mix and master, so that you had a better education of it and also a higher awareness of it. Because when you have the right knowledge, you can have the experience that you want to have, right? Dr. Joe Dispenza says knowledge is the precursor to experience, in which case, if you get the right knowledge from the right sources, you can have the right experience, or the experience that you're after, the experience right for you. So this is now post-production. We get into edits, clearly defining the beginning and ending. Sometimes, you don't think about the ending in the composition or production phase, but then once it's time to actually render and finalize, you start thinking, well, maybe I should do, just a little section here with like a slow down, tape stop effect or something like that. Of course, going back to gain staging and automation, this is just making sure that all the final volume settings are right where they need to be. Editing, which, those are closely related. Then we go into EQ, compression, saturation, stereo width, softening, and limiting. So this right here is in fact the mastering stage that we will go through together. All right, all right. So let's go over some of these mix decisions and why I went through them and how I went through them. So I'm gonna bypass the compressor that I usually use just as my starting point. Excuse me. And we're going to get into the mix. Here we go. Highly recommend you guys are sitting down. Highly recommend you guys drink a cup of water because this is going to be a wild ride. All right, so the gain plugin. This is the very first plugin that I always insert into my audio inserts effects mastering chain. Why? Well, I got to be honest. I want a margin of error. I want to be able to make mistakes in the production phase, push, limiters, saturators, get aggressive with it, and still not feel the consequence, right? Not experience the repercussions of being aggressive on the production phase. So what this gain plugin does is it gives me a margin of error that I didn't have before. Look, another approach could have been selecting all these tracks one by one and bringing all the faders down. To me, that's a waste of time. And also, bear in mind, what if I had already, created automation points, right? Not a good look. In which case, if I take that gain plugin, remove -10 decibels, I now have more room to play with in general. Controversial subject, but because we're in the world of music licensing, this seems to be a very practical step for me. And once we get to the end of this, you'll understand why. I'm going to master the track, and the RMS, the goal is for it to be anywhere between -10, -8. There are various arguments about this as well. Now, the reason I say -10, -8 is because in dance music, modern music, you have RMS levels that are like at -6, -4, and they're just pushing the envelope. In our case, we don't need to do that, but I do want it to have a semblance of a modern sound, in which case we're going to push a little bit harder. If you want to be more conservative, anywhere between -10 and -14 will work just fine too. All right, so once I do that, I go into the next plugin, and for me, that is the FabFilter Pro Q3. Now, I already showed you guys this, right? We went over the mastering cuts, 20K, 20K. Why do we do this? Well, there's a lot of noise in songs, and we want to make sure we eliminate anything that we're just not going to need. You'll notice when you start writing a bunch of music that there's a lot going on sonically, and harmonics are on top of harmonics, and usually there's just it gets messy. So this is a sure-proof way of getting across and not really um, having to know a lot about the subject. So I personally love it. I'm all about efficiency, speed, productivity, and quality, of course. So once I do that, we go into subtle cuts, and this is just um, a way of you to finally get to the last stage of the mixing and mastering process and to make the final corrections. Now, you can boost and you can also cut, you can eliminate stuff. When you do, if you do, I highly recommend you're very subtle about it. Since I've gone over this, I don't feel the need to go over it again. Please refer to the last video. And yeah, so that's step 2. We'll hit Command W to close that up. This is a new move that I've recently been applying. Mastering the Mix, the best metering plugin in the game, has this amazing plugin that I bow to. It's called Bass Room. And what Bass Room does is it essentially fixes the bass. And all of us in this industry, we know that the difference between the rookies, the people who are green, and the pros is that they really know how to mix bass. They really know how to make it sit in the mix, in which case this is a tool that can help make my life easier, make my life better. So I picked it up. Thank you, Tom, for that. I appreciate that. You guys should definitely check out their plugins. I've greatly benefited from what they do, their work, and I mean, look how easy it is. You go into the electronic preset here, right? They've got various genres, so I went into electronic, and then you just select the one that is compatible with your song, and then you can make adjustments. So, for example, if you just felt like the song needed a little bit more bass, you would just, lift 40 up or down. In my case, I felt it was already pretty sweet, so I left it where it was. Now, the reason I do this is because if I correct the bass, first and foremost, when that goes into the compressor, which is the next step, it's not going to overload it unnecessarily. It's going to hit the compressor, but it's going to hit it in a way that is clean and simple. I don't want to overload my song. I don't want my song to experience overdrive, too much push. So this is, again, a very clean and simple way to move forward with a better mix. So let's just play everything without the first 4 steps. All right, good. Now what you've noticed is the song got quieter. Well, it got quieter because we took away a lot of elements, right? During my EQ subtle cuts, I only bumped, one of the frequency bands. And with the bass room, I corrected the bass, and then now the compressor pushed the song down as well, only to bring it up. In which case, we get to the next phase of it. This plugin, while it may look very intimidating, At least I thought so when I first started. It's not. And look at the adjustments I made. Very simple. I essentially just created stereo width, right? Just a little bit. The default is at 100 and I just went up to 130. And then you can see I lifted a little bit of bass. Now this is the right section of the song, or what's considered the stereo part of the song. Um, and I just, lifted the bass a little bit. Here I did the same thing, and that's it. So I really just added bass with this section here. All right, so I added a little bit of stereo width. Think about this like a concept, not as the plugin. I'm not telling you to buy these plugins. I'm also going to show you some various simplified versions of this, but we have gain, right, to increase the margin of error. We have subtle cuts, EQ. We have a bass corrective software. We have a compressor, and then now we have stereo width. All right. Now for this song, I started adding more plugins. All right, this one is an EQ. It's basically an old analog model that they created to make tracks better. This is not necessary. This was a touch that I just wanted on this song. I really wanted the low end to be, clean and sophisticated. So okay, and then after this, I went ahead and added multiband compression. So some of you may be thinking, wait, didn't you compress already? Yes, but I did compress every individual frequency band, in which case this plugin is the one to do it. Now look, Logic has its stock. It's called Multipressor. I love it. I've grown accustomed to other tools now that I've been doing this for a while. And so this is just my weapon of choice. Let's take a listen. So automatically now you heard the song jump, right, in quality. It got bigger. Now what's happening here is that we're raising certain frequencies. You can see the bump here between 1 and 5K, and so that's really what you're hearing is things are just getting louder, things are moving a bit more. I love this, and the reason I use it is to create movement across the song. Look at the multiband compressor and look at the various meters as we play the song. Right, so look at that, like the signal is moving, right? Some things are getting louder, some things are getting quieter, and in doing so, it creates a pumping effect, right? It feels like it's alive. So once I use a multi-band compressor, I essentially go into this guy right here. This is called Tonelux Tilt, and it's just an EQ. It's just a very clean EQ. And what I do is I just take off some of the high end, in which case here you could see it's at 14K. So it's like, well, didn't you already do that? Yeah, but I wanted it a little bit more polished, and sometimes you have to reinforce these concepts by doing them twice or thrice. From here, I use this plugin. I don't want to get into this now, as it's not fundamental to what we're working on. Maybe on a later tutorial that has to do more with creativity. So then I get into this magnificent plugin. It's called Animate. Again, mastering the mix. This thing is a kind of last stop to getting your song to sound the way you need it to. I've been playing with this now for about 4 months, and again, I've noticed a jump in the quality of the mixes. Let me play without, particularly listen to the kick, listen to the overall richness of all the different tones. Listen. Now what it does is it allows me to control various aspects of the master at various levels. For example, here expand, it says lets you increase the difference between the louder and the quieter signal. So it's essentially compressing. Now I'm not using it in this particular song, but when you go to punch, you can see that the mono signal is being affected, and I'm lifting that up. This is where we get the kick to really come across in the mix or cut through the mix. This next feature is called Ignite. This introduces harmonic distortion, right? And if you know anything about harmonic distortion, you know that it adds a richness to the sound, right? It makes things sound authentic. And we're just doing that a little bit on the left and right signal. And then finally here, grow, it says increases the stereo width. I'm not utilizing that either. So in this case, I was just using a little bit of saturation and a little bit more punch to let the transients of the mix cut through. Use this on every mix pretty much. It's kind of, like I said, the last resort before I add a little bit of high-end sheen with an EQ. I only use the right side of this EQ. See where it says air gain at 20K. I just lift that up so it sounds a little bit brighter. This may be subtle to you, but for those of you with refined ears, take a listen. Yeah, you kind of really have to hear it for yourself to really understand what's going on here. But yeah, I just like to add air at the very end. Of course, once I get the final piece of it, I'll add my limiter. I'll push it accordingly, and let's see where we are according to our mix and master. Good. That's exactly where I wanted it. As far as the RMS, we're at -8. Let's listen without the mastering chain. -14. So you can see that we were, quite a way from the mark, right? If a dance song needs to be at -8, -6, -5, then you need to start adding things in order to fill that space. So I hope that helps. Let's go into some more simplified versions. And thank you guys for being here once again. I don't take this for granted. I feel just honored to be here, and the group is growing. Last week we had 19 members, and we heard David Forlano's testimony and Chris Chrisman. Shout out to you guys, and just really happy to see the group growing. Greg Goss has been putting out a lot of great music, and just stoked to see all of you develop. So really is a pleasure. So here we have another song, another mastering chain, and this time I'm going to reset it. And the reason I'm going to reset it is so that we can do something basic together. I've only got about 15 minutes or so, so I have a client coming in, but let me give you some basic scenarios, all right? So at the most basic level, I'm going to add gain. Let's see, I have that under utility, gain. And then again, I usually go -10 to start as far as my margin of error, and then we go from there. So let's listen to the song really quick. Now, this is a much more basic song, right? We've got 12 tracks, so you got to be a bit more crafty with your mix and master. So I'm going to go ahead, apply my usual information. I have a preset called Master Default, already has the cuts for me, and then I start to apply my subtle cuts. So that's, a woofy sound. It kind of has this Darth Vader quality. I don't want that in my mixes. I want high-end sheen. I want brilliance, right? A clean, punchy sound. We don't want anything to obstruct a full sound. So let's keep listening here. Yeah, it's like not a very pleasant sound. I'll take a little bit of that off as well. A lot of people, sometimes, well, how do I know? They'll ask, how do you know? It's like, well, you just have to kind of try it. You get used to it after a while. I know between 2 and 500, we usually have some mess. So let's look at that. You guys like how that sounds? It's not very pleasant, is it? All right, let's bring that down. And you look, I would take my time here. I would really kind of make sure it's exactly the way I want, and maybe create 1, 2, 3 bumps. So let's try to find something that sounds rich and interesting. The kick is obvious, is an obvious choice. Yeah, so you can hear as soon as I hit that 80 hertz mark that the kick becomes, obviously a lot more prominent. All right, good. Again, I would probably spend more time with it, but I got to keep moving here. And then I would add a compressor. Logic has a pretty nice one. For masters, I highly recommend VCA compressors, not FET. I would, maybe use this opto from time to time, but these VCAs are a bit more gentle in nature, and they really are the right fit. And again, I'm going to offer mixing and mastering courses so we can go in depth with all the various aspects, what a compressor does, how do I use an EQ, how do I properly use saturation. But for now, just know that the VCA compressor is the way to go when it comes to masters. Every time I start, I always initialize the preset or the plugin. So I don't want certain features on, right? I kind of set everything to 0, and you should probably take a screenshot of this so you can maybe save this later. So then I'll save this. I'll call it default. Good. So then now I turn on the compressor so I get -3 to 5 gain reduction. We can talk about the Y later, but just trust me, -3 to 5. Okay, let's get right into it. -3 to 5. Here's without it. Now, when I say -3 to 5 gain reduction, it means we're actually lowering the sound. But, excuse me, we then make up the sound by using the makeup gain. And we're going to do a lot more with this a little bit later in another webinar. But for now, that's good. And that's kind of the next stage, is to make things louder, to make things more kind of move and just feel, exciting. So after that, just to keep it real simple, I'll use some type of stereo imaging. Logic, I believe, has something called imaging. Hold on, I've moved all my plugins around, and so things have been customized for me, but it's called stereo spread. And the setting I like is a little bit more conservative than the defaults, like something like that, 18. So not sure if this translates on Zoom as far as panning and stereo imaging, but you get a bit more kind of an open sound. Check it out. Yeah, try it out on your own. Let me know what you guys think. But stereo imaging after that. For a song that's as basic as this is, I would probably add a multiband compressor. And how would I make that decision? Well, to be honest, I'd use the multimeter, which is under metering, and I would just look at the RMS. So let's see where we are now after this amount of processing. Yeah, so I'm at -16. The song is already kind of loud. I mean, think of it. The last song was at -14, so we're right in that ballpark. Yeah, let's try adding the multipressor and let's see if we get some good stuff from it. So maybe I'll go another EQ, and here I'll just add the Logic one. I'll just add what's called a high shelf. Why am I adding a high shelf? For high-end sheen, just that brilliant kind of clear sound. Let's see if that made a difference. Yeah, if you listen to the snare and the crash cymbal, you can really hear that. Check it out. Yeah, it actually sounds more realistic too, like an authentic drummer playing that when this is just MIDI. Let's add a little bit of a bass bump too. I'll just do a low shelf just to keep it simple. Maybe I'll cut some of the bottom stuff so it doesn't get, muffled. If you wanted more bass, you wanted to be more aggressive, you could do that here. Again, listen to the kick and you'll hear the evidence. Right, just has a lot more weight. Now I like to be a bit more subtle in my approach, so I'm going to go to 5 there. After that, I'll add the multi-pressor under Dynamics, multi-pressor, here we go. And, I usually just start off with the preset. And looks like I have something here. Let's try it. Don't remember seeing this. So all of a sudden, this song has completely come alive by means of the multipressor. Let's play before, after. Yeah, you can hear the crunchiness of the guitar. Sounds like there's a live band in the room. Why does this happen? Because we're compressing every individual frequency band now. It's not just one compressor, it's actually four on all the four frequency bands. You got the low from 20 to 150 hertz, and then compressor number two from 150 to 1K, 1K to 5K, and then finally 5 to 20. Critical step in the mastering process, all using stock plugins. Finally, at the very end here, to keep it very simple, I'll go ahead and add the dynamic adaptive limiter. Where are you? I don't even think I have it. Yeah, I don't have it here because I use other. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I believe, yeah, I created a limiter tab, adaptive limiter. I can show you guys how to customize your Logic sounds and plugins later. So, pretty simple. Various arguments again here, just like everything on the internet. But to keep it safe, negative 1.0 is a good starting point. And if you want to hear more girth and more power, you just go to about negative 3. The most I would do if this was a modern song, I would go negative 0.01. But for this song and for music licensing, this is probably a good bet. I'm going to lift up that gain, drive it all the way up till I get negative 3 to 5 gain reduction. Seems to be a running theme, right? Check it out. Great, it looks like that worked out quite nicely. I'm going to look at my RMS meter and what are the numbers? Go ahead and guess. I'll let you guys guess. I'm sure you guys can talk in the webinar. Go ahead. Who guessed right? Let me see. Eldon. Just kidding. All right. So look at the RMS meter. Let's see what happens. Fantastic. So look, negative 11. Again, to be conservative, negative 10 to 14. This is a rock and roll song, so I may want to go the other way, which is negative 10, negative 8. Let me push a little harder, at least to get to negative 10. Yeah. Cool. I like the sound of that. Sounds authentic, right? It lends itself well to this style. Let's listen to this without the chain. Good. And let's say you still wanted to get more volume out of this. Well, do you remember that margin of error? We would push this up and take some of that away so the song becomes louder. Let's see what this sounds like. Yeah, I like it. Great job. Okay, so hopefully you guys are getting some benefit from this. And I'm sorry, I said I was using only stock plugins, but the only one that was not stock was the Pro Q3. I've already said if I was stuck on an island with no food, no women, no nothing, I would make sure I have my Pro Q3. All right, guys, let me do one more. I do have to get out of here. I got a client coming in right now. Let me play the likes of which I'd never seen, which was on The Healer, Season 1. This was a docu-series on TLC. And this is just a very basic song. This is more for my, composers and orchestrators and things of that nature, because one of the challenges in this style of music is that you're not really getting a lot of input from the tracks, meaning you're not getting a lot of gain. So how do we manufacture this when a song is so bare boned? So I'll let you take a glass of water, let you drink it, take a second here, and then we will go. And I guess I'll take this moment here to just remind you guys that starting next month, the first Saturday of every month, I'm going to be offering a kind of specified webinar every single Saturday, the first Saturday of every month, on a subject. So, last time I did creating edits, right? And this time I'll do, referencing meters, or if I have something that you guys want to really see, I'll take that request and we'll go from there. I'm also going to be offering a logic course at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every single Saturday. All right. So to be clear, there's going to be a logic course that's going on. I'm going to give you all the ins and outs of the program. I'm going to give you all the knowledge that I've acquired. I've read 9 manuals. I'm one of 2 T3 certified trainers in the entire California region, and very proud of that. I work with Apple, and I just want to give you guys the information because it's really made a difference in my life. So that's every Saturday at 10 a.m. If you guys are interested, let me know. And then, of course, I'm going to be offering the first Saturday of every month a specific webinar on one of the subjects that we'd like to cover here. All right, let's move on here. Last one. So again, this is a composer's approach, if you will. Let me let you hear this. Okay, so you guys hear what this is about. This is just a bed of music, really simple. You'd be surprised how many requests there is out there for simple music like this. I actually got an awesome compliment by a guy named Larry Barker, who's a publisher, and he said, "Eddie, I just love your use of space," and I took that to heart. And here's how I approached this one. Now, look, your uh, available knowledge grows with time, right? So here I was using an entirely different approach, but I want to show it to you. So here I was inspired by one of the greats, Mr. Andrew Sheps, and his approach, and did the same thing I did before, cutting some of the lows. I wasn't applying the high-end cuts at the time, but you can see, right, made some subtle cuts. And after that, I applied the gain plugin. This is where you moderate the volume. Then I added 2 compressors. Well, look what it sounds like with just one. All right, let's hear just one. So slight bump in volume. Right, I was at like negative 28, negative 30. Now I'm at negative 24.9 on the meter on the left-hand side. Let's add a second one to make that a little louder. Now we're at negative 18, so I'm just trying to maximize on my volume here. So we added 2 compressors. All right, from here, channel EQ, high end, sheen. That's right, we added air. These are common terms, common lingo in the industry. And then finally, I added some tape saturation. This is unique to Logic. This is a stock plugin. If I had the plugins now, then that I have now, then I would have added one of my tape simulators. And this just creates a nice warm texture. Check out tape saturation. It's fantastic. One of my favorite things about mastering, actually. From there, added some more volume as I needed more all across. Little happy face there. Check it out. All right. Then I added a mastering EQ called Spectre. This is by Waves Factory. I miss this plugin. I haven't used it in a while. That's like you always go and you start using different things, but I love it. It has a lot of different features, and just even these presets are pretty fantastic. So let's say we wanted to add some stereo width, right? It does it here. A lot more complicated than it looks. Let's see what happens. Yeah, I like that. Kind of a subtle little change there, but finally here at the end is where we get the overall sound. So let me go ahead and bring up my meter again, the multimeter Logic stock plugin. I will have that side by side with its limiter, buddy. And be sure to use the adaptive limiter, not the limiter. So the adaptive limiter is specialized and is meant to master, whereas the limiter has to do with the tracks themselves. And then this little dance happens between the gain plugin, the multimeter, and the adaptive limiter. Check it out. All right, so we're at negative 23. Let's bump this up. Here we go. So in this case, I actually had to add gain in order to get my RMS to negative 12. Negative 16 would have sufficed, but again, I wanted to drive a little bit more. Let's listen to the end here. All right, my friends, I hope you guys enjoyed this installment. Before I go, I just want to tell a quick story. Um, when I was a kid, I grew up in a rough neighborhood, and my sister and I used to walk to school. Well, on this particular day, for whatever reason, when I was walking back home, which was only, I don't know, a 10-minute walk or something, I had these brand new Jordans on, right? I was a big fan of Michael Jordan at the time. And somebody came up to me, an older kid, pushed me around and took my shoes. And he didn't beat me up, but he definitely was dominant. And I remember walking home with my socks, right? And I was walking home and really sad about the whole thing. And I remember I just kind of sat on the couch and was lost in thought. Well, it was probably an hour or two after, I don't remember. But my dad came in and he's like, "Hey, what's going on with you?" And I said, "Oh, somebody stole my shoes." And look, my dad wasn't the most active dad in the world, but he got so infuriated. He said, "Get in the car." So we got in the car, we drove around the neighborhood where this kid used to hang out. And I don't remember all the details, but my dad stood up for me. It was like probably, I don't know, the only time that he did. And something happened to me in that moment when another man stood up for me and I saw that he cared and respected and loved me. And I got my shoes back. And it was like the most amazing feeling, man. And these are the moments that define you. You get these experiences that really kind of shape you. And the reason I'm telling you this story is because I'm standing up for you in doing all this work and being here and being open. I do this for you. I have no reason to do this. I just want to share who I am, what I'm doing. I want to take the wealth of experiences that I've had in editing bays, networking with various people, getting high level placements. And I just want to tell you that you can do it too. If a guy like me with my background, no knowledge of this particular industry 5 years ago, no connections, if I could somehow create a way, then you can do it too. And that's my testimony, and I'm going to stand by it. I champion you. I'm here for you. I will stand up and fight for you. I believe in all of you, and I don't know what you're going to do. I don't know who's going to write the next big song. I don't know who's going to get the next big placement. I don't know who's going to get the next big contract. But what I do know for a fact is that if you want this, you too can do it. I'm not messing around. This is your time now. I've had my success and I'm going far. I'm going bigger. I'm going harder. But it doesn't mean anything unless you share it. A life well lived is not one lived in isolation. It's when you reach out to the world and you tell them that you're here, right? I've had great mentors in my life, but my aim is to touch as many people as I can before it's my time to go. So, again, I don't take this for granted. I'm doing my best to work hard and provide a great product every time. I have so many great things in store, and I'm just getting the hours to do them. So, Thank you guys so much for helping me create all this, and blessings to you guys. I speak only great things over you, and man, make it a great day. Thank you so much for everything, and I will see you guys next week. Stay tuned for more. All right, cheers.